The Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment. From 1932 to 1972, the United States government, through the U.S. Public Health Service, USPS, conducted a notorious yet cruel study known as the Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male in rural Macon County, Alabama. Initially, the study's purpose was to document the natural progression of syphilis in untreated individuals in order to understand the various stages of the disease. However, the research quickly transformed into an inhumane experiment. Hundreds of men, mostly impoverished, uneducated laborers, were deceived by being kept unaware of their actual diagnosis, even though syphilis can cause severe damage to the brain, heart, and even death, and were denied treatment even after penicillin, a widely recognized antibiotic proven effective since 1947, became available. Researchers continuously monitored the health status of the subjects over several decades, meticulously recording severe symptoms such as vision loss, neurological degeneration, cardiovascular disorders, and other dangerous complications. To ensure that the participants would continue to show up for high-risk and stress-involved medical examinations, including procedures such as lumbar punctures presented as special treatment, the researchers sent deceptive invitation letters titled "Last Chance for Special Free Treatment." Throughout the study, the subjects were provided with free medical checkups, hot meals, and burial insurance. However, they were never informed that they truly suffered from syphilis. Instead, they were told they were being treated for bad blood, a local term used to refer to various conditions such as anemia, fatigue, and syphilis. As the truth about the experiment gradually emerged in the early 1970s, global public outrage exploded over the horrific consequences suffered by the subjects, from losing family members to being abandoned medically. This event spurred the establishment of independent review committees and the formulation of strict ethical guidelines, including the mandatory requirement of informed consent as recorded in documents like the Nuremberg Code and the Belmont Report. The legacy of this experiment stands as a monumental lesson on human rights, transparency, and ethical responsibility in scientific research, standards that today are indispensable in every biomedical project. Nazi human experiments. In the chaotic context of World War II, Nazi Germany's doctors and scientists carried out a series of brutal experiments on prisoners in concentration camps to serve both military objectives and to reinforce the regime's racial theories. Inspired by Darwin's theories of natural selection, doctors adhering to racial hygiene believed that conducting experiments on subjects they deemed genetically inferior would help elevate the quality of the stress-superior race. Prisoners including Jews, Roma, Poles, Soviet PS, and the disabled were treated as mere experimental objects with no regard for their human dignity. The aim of these experiments was not only to search for methods to support soldiers in combat, but also to demonstrate the biological differences among various stress racial groups. The experiments were carried out using extreme and uncompromising methods that disregarded both life and dignity. For example, at Dow, doctors employed pressure chambers to simulate conditions at extremely stress-high altitudes, determining the limits of human tolerance to oxygen deprivation. Additionally, freezing experiments were performed by immersing prisoners in ice water or leaving them outdoors in harsh cold conditions without any protective measures, causing many to suffer from severe hypothermia and irreversible bodily damage. Furthermore, prisoners were subjected to invasive surgical procedures such as dismemberment and the removal of bones, muscles, and nerves without any anesthesia, all to study tissue regeneration. These methods inflicted excruciating pain and left permanent debilitating consequences on the victims. After the war, the medical atrocities committed by Nazi Germany were put on trial in the doctor's trial at Nuremberg. These unethical human experiments shocked the world and led to the creation of the Nuremberg Code, a set of ethical principles mandating voluntary, uncoerced, informed consent in biomedical research. These principles later became the foundation for legal and ethical regulations to protect human dignity in research. The Stanford Prison Experiment. In 1971, renowned psychologist Philip Zimbardo launched the Stanford Prison Experiment with the ambitious goal of exploring how situational forces and assigned social roles could profoundly influence individual behavior and personality. To achieve this, volunteer participants were randomly divided into two distinct groups, the guards and the prisoners, to create a realistic simulation of a prison environment within the basement of Stanford University. The experiment was designed to investigate whether ordinary people, when placed in positions of authority or subjugation, would quickly adopt behaviors that they might not normally exhibit. Zimbardo and his team aimed to observe the psychological effects of perceived power and the stress that comes with role assignment. Although the original plan was to study these dynamics over several weeks in a controlled setting, the experiment rapidly evolved into a striking case study of how easily social roles can lead to abuse and dehumanization. From the very start, the dynamics in the simulated prison shifted dramatically. The participants assigned to the role of guards began to exhibit authoritarian behavior, using harsh control measures and punitive tactics to manage the prisoners. As days passed, what had been intended as a controlled observation turned into a scenario characterized by daily episodes of verbal abuse, physical intimidation, and psychological torture. The prisoners, in turn, became increasingly distressed and began to lose their sense of individual identity, ultimately showing signs of extreme anxiety and depression. The experiment spiraled quickly as the guards exploited their power without restraint, leading to a highly charged hostile environment that was far more chaotic and harmful than Zimbardo had anticipated. Initially planned to last for several weeks, the rapid deterioration of the situation forced the research team to terminate the study after only a few days in order to prevent further psychological damage to the participants. The Stanford Prison Experiment left a lasting and painful legacy regarding the impact of authority on human behavior. It clearly demonstrated that ordinary individuals could, under certain conditions, transform into agents capable of extreme cruelty when placed in positions of power without adequate oversight. The dramatic escalation of abusive behavior underscored the potent influence of situational factors and highlighted the vulnerability of individuals when stripped of their autonomy. In the aftermath, the experiment sparked intense debate within both the academic community and the public sphere, prompting a critical re-examination of ethical standards in psychological research. Its findings have since influenced the development of stricter ethical guidelines for studies involving human subjects, emphasizing the importance of protecting participants from psychological harm. Ultimately, the experiment remains a powerful reminder of the dark potential embedded within hierarchical systems, and the need for constant vigilance to ensure ethical treatment in all research settings. The Milgram Obedience Experiment. In the early 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram designed his groundbreaking obedience experiment to understand the extent to which individuals would follow orders from an authority figure, even when those orders conflict with their personal moral values. Milgram was driven by a desire to explore the psychological mechanisms behind obedience and to determine whether the tendency to obey authority could lead individuals to commit acts they would typically consider reprehensible. The research was set against the backdrop of post-war reflection on atrocities committed during the Holocaust, and Milgram hoped his work would provide insights into how ordinary people could be led to commit harmful acts under authoritative pressure. His study was intended to reveal not only the power of authority in shaping behavior, but also to shed light on the underlying processes that make individuals susceptible to obedience, raising important questions about personal responsibility in morally challenging situations. Milgram's experimental setup involved assigning participants the role of teachers, while a confederate of the experiment played the role of the learner. The teachers were instructed to administer a series of electric shocks to the learner each time an incorrect answer was given to a learning task. Although the shocks were simulated, the teachers were led to believe they were real and capable of inflicting painful harm. Despite initial hesitation and evident distress, most participants continued to administer shocks when prompted by the authoritative experimenter present in the room, who insisted that they proceed with the experiment. This finding revealed a deeply unsettling truth. Ordinary individuals were willing to follow orders that resulted in causing pain to another person, highlighting the formidable influence of authority on human behavior. The results of the Milgram Obedience Experiment sent shock waves through both the scientific community and the broader public. Milgram found that a significant majority of participants were willing to administer shocks up to dangerously high levels when instructed by an authority figure, despite their personal misgivings about harming another human being. This revelation sparked widespread ethical debates regarding the extent of personal responsibility and the moral boundaries of obedience. The study forced society to confront difficult questions about the nature of authority and the conditions under which individuals are capable of inflicting harm. In addition to reshaping our understanding of obedience, Milgram's work played a crucial role in prompting the development of more stringent ethical standards for research involving human subjects, ensuring that the dignity and rights of participants are safeguarded in all future studies. Project MK-Ultra. Project MK-Ultra was a covert program conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency CIA during the 1950s and 1960s, initiated in the tense atmosphere of the Cold War. The project aimed to explore methods of mind control and behavioral manipulation, driven by a deep-seated fear that adversaries might be using similar techniques against the United States. The original objective was to develop techniques that could break the will of enemy agents, effectively rendering them controllable. However, the scope of the project soon expanded dramatically, as researchers delved into the use of various chemical, biological, and psychological techniques that ultimately inflicted severe and long-lasting harm on unwitting subjects. Under the umbrella of MK-Ultra, the CIA conducted numerous experiments involving the administration of LSD, hallucinogens, and other psychoactive substances to individuals who were unaware of the true nature of the research. These experiments often took place without proper informed consent, and the subjects, typically ordinary citizens, were exposed to substances and procedures that caused profound psychological and physical side effects. In some instances, subjects were subjected to extreme interrogation techniques, sensory deprivation, and other mind-altering methods designed to break down their resistance and alter their behavior permanently. The combination of these manipulative techniques left enduring scars on many participants, both mentally and physically, and has since been widely condemned as a gross violation of human rights and ethical research standards. When the details of MK-Ultra eventually emerged in the public domain, the revelation triggered widespread outrage and condemnation. The project, conducted in utmost secrecy, had flagrantly violated human rights by using innocent individuals as test subjects without their knowledge or consent. Although the project was eventually shut down, the psychological and physical damage inflicted on its subjects continues to haunt many survivors. MK-Ultra not only altered public perceptions of the U.S. intelligence community, but also led to a major overhaul of research ethics and legal safeguards designed to protect human subjects in future experiments. Its legacy serves as a stark reminder of the perils of allowing scientific research to be used as a tool for political and military purposes, and it underscores the imperative to rigorously uphold human dignity and informed consent in all research endeavors. The Willowbrook Hepatitis Experiments. At Willowbrook State School, a state-run institution in New York designed for children with intellectual disabilities, researchers from the mid-1950s to the 1970s conducted experiments to study hepatitis. The institution was notorious for its appalling living conditions and severe overcrowding, which compounded the vulnerability of its residents. In this setting, children with intellectual disabilities became the unwitting subjects of deliberately cruel experiments. The primary objective was to observe the natural progression of hepatitis following intentional infection, with the hope of finding effective treatments and preventive measures. However, the choice of such a highly vulnerable population, coupled with the deplorable conditions of the institution, immediately raised profound ethical concerns and set the stage for a controversy that would haunt medical research for decades. In these experiments, researchers intentionally infected children with hepatitis using methods that varied from oral administration to injections, and then meticulously tracked the progression of the disease through regular medical examinations, blood tests, and other diagnostic procedures. Guardians and families were either misinformed or not fully informed about the true purpose of these experiments, and proper informed consent was never obtained. The methods employed at Willowbrook demonstrated a disturbing prioritization of scientific objectives over the basic rights, dignity, and well-being of the human subjects involved. This deliberate exposure of children to a debilitating disease resulted in irreversible physical and psychological harm, leaving a legacy of trauma for the affected individuals and their families. When the details of the Willowbrook experiments eventually came to light, They provoked overwhelming public outcry and widespread condemnation. The scandal led to numerous lawsuits, thorough investigations, and a national reevaluation of ethical standards in medical research. As a direct result, authorities were compelled to implement stricter regulations and reforms, most notably emphasizing the necessity of informed consent and the establishment of institutional review boards, IRBs, to safeguard the rights of research subjects. The Willowbrook experiments have since become a somber reminder of the potential consequences when vulnerable populations are exploited in the name of scientific progress, and they continue to influence the ethical framework and legal requirements governing human subject research today. The Guatemala Syphilis Experiments. In the 1940s, U.S. scientists operating under government sponsorship and in collaboration with local Guatemalan authorities conducted a series of experiments aimed at studying syphilis and other sexually transmitted diseases. The experiments targeted populations that had little or no ability to refuse participation, including prisoners, mental patients, and soldiers, making them highly vulnerable to coercion and abuse. The initial purpose of these studies was to assess the effectiveness of various antibiotics in treating syphilis, with researchers deliberately exposing subjects to the syphilis bacterium to observe the natural progression of the disease. However, the lack of informed consent and the vulnerable status of the subjects resulted in a gross violation of human rights. During the Guatemala Syphilis Experiments, subjects were intentionally infected with the bacterium that causes syphilis. Their clinical progress was closely monitored through repeated medical examinations, laboratory tests, and detailed record-keeping. Throughout the process, the participants were not informed about the true nature of the experiments, and they were systematically denied access to proper treatment even when effective antibiotics became available. This deliberate exposure, combined with the lack of adequate medical care, forced the subjects to endure severe physical pain and prolonged psychological distress. Many participants ultimately suffered fatal consequences from untreated complications of the disease, highlighting the extreme ethical violations that underpin the research. When the Guatemala experiments were eventually exposed to the international community, there was widespread horror and condemnation over the level of cruelty and disregard for human rights exhibited by the researchers. The scandal triggered multiple investigations, legal actions, and a significant push for reform in the ethics of medical research. These experiments became a pivotal case study that spurred the development of stricter standards for informed consent, transparency, and the protection of vulnerable populations in clinical research. The legacy of the Guatemala Syphilis Experiments remains a solemn reminder that scientific advancement must never come at the expense of human dignity.